Imagine watching a scientist examine a sample under a microscope. He isn't looking at something from yesterday, or even last year. He's studying something that, according to history, has existed for more than 12 centuries. When the analysis is finished, the results leave everyone in the room completely silent. Because if they're correct, they shouldn't be possible. For over 1200 years, people have called it a miracle. Skeptics have called it a legend. Scientists simply called it a specimen. But before you decide what you believe, wait until you see the final discovery. Because this isn't just the story of an ancient miracle. It's the story of what happened when modern science decided to investigate it. The story doesn't begin with certainty. It begins with doubt. Somewhere around the 8th century, inside a small monastery in the Italian town of Lanciano, a priest stood before the altar preparing to celebrate Mass. From the outside, everything appeared normal. The candles burned quietly. The prayers echoed through the church. The faithful waited in silence. But inside the priest's mind, a battle had already begun. He had celebrated the Eucharist countless times. He had repeated the same sacred words over and over again. Yet a question refused to leave him. What if this isn't really happening? What if the bread remains only bread, and the wine remains only wine? For centuries, many people have imagined saints as individuals who never struggled with doubt. History tells a different story. Even those closest to God have experienced moments of uncertainty. And on that particular day, one priest's private struggle would become the beginning of one of Christianity's greatest mysteries. No one else in the church knew what he was thinking. No one suspected anything unusual. Until the moment of consecration. The priest raised the host. He pronounced the familiar words, exactly as he had done hundreds of times before. Then, everything stopped. He stared at the host in disbelief. Something was changing. Not symbolically, not spiritually, physically. According to the oldest accounts, the white host was no longer white. Its appearance transformed before his eyes. The wine inside the chalice also changed. Panic replaced doubt. The priest stood frozen, unable to continue, unable to speak. The congregation immediately realized something was wrong. People left their places. They gathered around the altar. What they saw would be remembered for more than 12 centuries. The host appeared to have become flesh. The wine appeared to have become blood. News spread rapidly. Pilgrims began arriving. Some came searching for answers. Others came searching for hope. But perhaps the most extraordinary part of the story hadn't happened yet, because centuries later, science would ask a question no one in the 8th century could have imagined. As the centuries passed, the relics were carefully preserved. Wars came and went. Empires rose and disappeared. Still, the mysterious flesh and blood remained. For generations, people believed. Others doubted. Eventually, someone suggested something almost unthinkable. Don't simply look at the relics, test them. Not through faith, through science, modern laboratories, microscopes, chemical analysis, histology. For the first time, the mystery would face the methods of modern medicine. Could centuries of devotion survive scientific examination? Or would the legend finally come to an end? No one knew. And that uncertainty made the investigation one of the most anticipated examinations in the history of Christian relics. For more than 12 centuries, people had argued about the miracle. Believers pointed to faith. Skeptics pointed to legend. But science asks different questions. It doesn't begin with belief. It begins with evidence. In the 1970s, one of Italy's most respected scientists was invited to examine the relics. Professor Odoardo Linoli, a specialist in anatomy, pathological histology, chemistry, and clinical microscopy. His task wasn't to defend a miracle, nor to disprove one. His responsibility was much simpler: determine exactly what these mysterious relics were. Tiny samples were carefully examined. Every procedure followed accepted scientific methods. No shortcuts, no assumptions, only observation. Days turned into weeks. The laboratory remained silent. Then, The first results began to emerge, and they surprised everyone. The mysterious flesh wasn't symbolic. It wasn't painted. It wasn't made of wax. It wasn't preserved animal tissue. According to the examination, it was real human tissue. But that was only the beginning, because the next discovery would become even more difficult to explain. Scientists continued their analysis. If the flesh was human, what part of the body did it come from? The answer arrived with remarkable precision. The tissue belonged to the human heart, more specifically, the myocardium, the muscular wall responsible for pumping blood through the body. It wasn't a random fragment. It was one of the most vital organs in human life. The blood produced another surprise. It was also human, and further testing identified something unexpected. The blood type was AB, an uncommon blood group, yet one that has appeared in studies connected with several other Christian relics. Researchers documented their observations carefully. No sensational language, no dramatic conclusions, only data, only measurable findings. For many people, that alone was astonishing. But perhaps the greatest question had not yet been asked. How could human tissue remain preserved for more than 12 centuries without the preservation techniques available today? That question would become the center of the mystery. If you enjoy documentaries where history, science, and faith intersect, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Divine Eternal Stories, where every week we explore the world's greatest Christian mysteries through history, eyewitness testimony, and documented investigations. And stay with us, because the final discovery is the one that continues dividing scientists and believers even today. Scientific analysis can identify tissue. It can classify blood. It can measure cells. But sometimes, science also reveals the limits of what it can explain. Researchers found no evidence that the relics had been artificially manufactured. No indication that they were sculpted. No sign that they had been chemically created to deceive. Even more intriguing, the tissue had survived century after century, despite conditions that, under normal circumstances, should have led to decomposition. This does not mean science proved a miracle. Science does not establish miracles. It examines physical evidence. And in this case, the evidence raised questions that extended beyond the laboratory. Some researchers proposed natural explanations that remained debated. Others argued that the preservation itself deserved further study. Even today, the discussion continues, not because everyone agrees, but because no single explanation has convinced everyone. And perhaps, that is exactly what has kept the mystery alive for more than 1,200 years. Let's go back to the priest. Because after all the scientific reports, all the laboratory analyses, all the debates, it's easy to forget how this story actually began. Not with certainty, with doubt. One man stood at the altar wondering whether he had spent his life believing something that wasn't true. He wasn't trying to convince anyone. He wasn't searching for attention. In fact, according to tradition, he desperately wished nothing unusual would happen. Yet if the ancient accounts are true, the very moment he questioned his faith became the moment history would remember forever. Isn't that remarkable? The miracle wasn't given to someone with perfect certainty. It was given to someone who struggled, someone whose heart looked very much like ours. Because doubt isn't the opposite of faith. Sometimes, it's the beginning of a deeper search. Perhaps that is why this story has survived for more than 12 centuries. Not because everyone agrees about what happened, but because almost everyone understands what it feels like to ask difficult questions. Of all the discoveries made during the scientific investigation, one continues to capture people's imagination: the heart. Not a hand, not bone, not skin, the heart. Whether you approach the story as a believer, a historian, or simply someone fascinated by unexplained events, that detail is impossible to ignore. Across cultures, the heart has always represented something deeper than an organ. It symbolizes love, life, sacrifice, compassion, hope. Was that merely coincidence, or part of the mystery itself? No laboratory can answer that question. Science can identify tissue, It cannot explain meaning. And perhaps, meaning is exactly what millions of pilgrims continue searching for when they travel to Lanciano today. Not proof. Meaning. Today, people still enter the sanctuary quietly. Some carry cameras. Others carry medical reports. Some bring curiosity. Others bring pain. Many arrive hoping to solve the mystery. Most leave asking a different question. Not, did the miracle happen? But, what would I have done if I had been that priest? Would I have believed what I was seeing? Would I have trusted my own eyes? Or would I have spent the rest of my life trying to explain it away? Perhaps that is why the miracle of Lanciano continues speaking to people after more than 12 centuries. Not because it forces anyone to believe, but because it invites every visitor to confront the same question that changed one priest's life forever. What do you do when something challenges everything you thought you knew? Maybe that has always been the real miracle. Before you leave, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you had been the scientist examining these relics, what conclusion do you think you would have reached? Do you believe science and faith can work together? Or do you think some mysteries will always remain beyond explanation? Share your perspective in the comments. I read as many of them as I can, and some of the most thoughtful conversations on this channel begin there. And if you enjoy uncovering the hidden stories behind Christianity's greatest miracles, saints, and sacred places, subscribe to Divine Eternal Stories. Every week, we journey to another place where history, mystery, and hope come together. Because the next story may challenge what you think you know. All over again,